Hello, I'm Kayla Scrivener, and today I'm going to be doing my October wrap up, and I'm excited that it is not super late. It's still November, guys. I'm doing amazing. So I only read 6 books this month, and it was not very varied, so I'm sorry for that. But we're going to jump right in. The first 2 books I'm going to talk about together because they're a series, and that is The Vile Village and The Hostile Hospital by Lemony Snicket for a series of unfortunate events. I don't have a lot to say about them. I gave both 3 stars. I think that they're great children's books. I think that it is really important to write to children in a way that is not looking down on them, but teaches them and writes intelligently and makes reference to a lot of things that might be considered too mature for them. I think that that is something that I really appreciate in it. And as the morality gets more murkier, I really appreciate that. And I realize that the farther it goes away from the formulaic beginnings, the more I enjoy it. And I think that his writing is clever and enjoyable. And yeah, for a children's book, I think that they're really good. And I don't mean that as a demeaning way. I just think that it's good, but it's obviously not the same for an adult audience. And then we have American Gods. This I gave 3 stars, and this is a very complicated situation because I really appreciate the concept. I think that Neil Gaiman is a wonderfully, beautifully written author that I've read a ridiculous amount of his books for him not being a favorite author of mine, but I do really enjoy the concepts that he makes and the ways that he explores them. I think the belief systems and that idea that throughout time people value different things and make them gods is something that is very interesting, in the way that people feel threatened by the fading of interest and the fadings of a life, especially since it's kind of set around the turn of the millennium. I think that that's a time when there was a radical change and there is a lot of interesting dialogue in that, and I appreciate that. But there's something about this book that just grated me. I don't often deal well with books that are very harsh in their descriptions. There's something that like picks at my PTSD that just makes it like grating and puts me in a funk and just really depresses me. And there's aspects of this book, I think, especially the like graphic depictions of sex, as well as just like the constant swearing that just constantly like made me feel very like anxious. And that doesn't always happen with those things. Like I obviously read books with those happening, but there's something about this that just really upset me throughout, and I was really saddened by that because I really wanted to appreciate the book because there's a lot of aspects that I really did, but sadly I kind of put it there because for my enjoyment wise it was actually not that high, but I think that the quality of the writing and the quality of the discussion was up there, so I'm giving it a 3 stars as a middle of the road, very high amazingments, and then a lot of like low things for personal enjoyment. And then we have another 2 books in a series that I read, and I gave 4 stars to Praetor's Gold, which is the second book in the Mortal Engines series, and this is by Philip Reeve, and he writes a story about this world that is set a few millenniums from now, I'm not sure exactly, way in the future, when cities have become mobile and they actually go around and like eat different cities, and it's kind of thinking about the carnivorous way of life and culture, and it's very interesting. My favorite thing about the world building, I think there's a lot of humor in the writing, and I really appreciate the dialogue of the way that our world in the 21st century always seems incredibly foreign to them, and I love that aspects of when our time and space is the thing that is at odds with them, and they're just always shocked by it. I really, really enjoyed the second book. The character work and the writing was really good. Some of the decisions by the main characters made me really frustrated. I also enjoyed the fact that it took 2 years later, and I feel like a lot of YA books don't really let them have space. It's like they have all the character development, but it all took place in a week, and that wasn't what happened here. It was a 2 year, and we really see the development and the growth of relationship and dynamics in the world in that time, and I really appreciate it. But then we move on to the third book in the series, and it has a fourth book that I'm going to be reading in December, so I'm hoping it will redeem my feelings. This was a 2 star, and it took place 16 years later, and I think that that what's ruined it for me. I could not wait to get into it because there's some cliffhangers and there's amazingness and character moments right at the end where we're going to be able to dive into those, and we're not able to do that because it's 16 years in the future. And they make decisions that kind of could have made sense based on the events that took place, but since there's a 16-year-old gap, it just doesn't seem like that would happen. And they just don't seem like the same characters because they seem more immature and less developed than they did in the first 2 books, despite being 16 years later. And it has a different focus and different development, and it has a different style and the way that the narrative works. And I was not very impressed by it. I think that the writing was still good and the world building was still good, but just the character work and a lot of the plot lacked for me. And then for 3 stars, we have my final book, which is The Eye of the World, which is the first book in the Wheel of Time series. And I was pressured to pick this up because of Daniel Green and Murphy Napier just loving it so much. And I've watched a lot of videos about the love of it, and I was just like, I'm gonna pick this up, I'm gonna enjoy it. And I do think that the world building and the character work was really well. I think that it's a series that I could definitely grow into loving more and more throughout. I listened to it all in one sitting because I was enchanted. But it wasn't something that I ended up having very strong feelings with, especially afterwards. I don't like think about it and I'm like, whatever. And I do really love sprawling narratives, and I feel like the more I get into the series, the more I will enjoy it. But for a first book, it wasn't the most enticing thing for me. And I think that that's because I don't know. I think that might be more of the like 1990s kind of writing, but I do really look forward to seeing more of it and developing into it. And if you have an interest in epic fantasy, I would definitely recommend it as it's a placeholder in the genre and very well known. Anyways, happy reading and writing. Let me know what you have read lately, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.